Hello, everybody. So I had this crazy idea to go through. I've been having a lot of book hauls this year, but haven't been reading a lot of my physical TBR. So in preparation for 2022, some reading goals, I thought that I would just physically take out at least one book from all the series that I own physically and talk about them and talk about, go through each of them so I have a better idea of how many physical books I have on my TBR and what are my goals for next year. So let's go through the book. I almost said bookshop. The bookshelves. Okay. What has become immediately apparent is I need to read more of the physical books that I actually own instead of reading so many books from the library. But also I love, mood reading. I don't know. We'll see. But I have a lot of books, as you can see, that I own that I have not read. So what I'm going to do this video, I'm literally going to go through every single book and just tell you what I know about it. Some of these, it's I don't know at all. I just found them at a good deal somewhere. Some of them, obviously, I've been looking forward to for a long time. Some of them fall somewhere in between. But I kept this to only fiction, broadly. I didn't do nonfiction, and I didn't do informational, historical fiction or anything like that. I kept this very focused on fictional works that I want to read, so this is not taking into account any of the philosophy or broader nonfiction that I also have on my TBR. I thought that would be too much, and people normally aren't interested in that. So let's start with sort of classical literature, and then we'll go from there. That's this pile over here. Well, except for Malice. Malice, you're not classical literature. All right, so first off, Don Quixote. I have never read this, and I want to. I feel like it's a rite of passage for readers. Very thick. Obviously, the Spanish classic. Chivalry, romance, Sancho Panza, all that kind of stuff. I don't know. It's Don Quixote. What else do I need to say? I should read it. So, have that. In the same realm, I have Leo Tolstoy's magnificent War and Peace. I read two works by Tolstoy this year. I read his smallest novel, The Death of Ivan Ilyich, which is just fantastic. I'd recommend anyone to read it. It's 83 pages. It's an astounding reflection on death. And then I read one of his non-fiction works about his life called A Confession, about his sort of spiritual transformation in his latter life, which also I found fascinating. So one of my goals in the next couple of years is to read Tolstoy's major works. So start out with War and Peace, which I believe was what won him acclaim, and then I want to read Anna Karenina and The Kingdom of God, I think it's called. Anyway, so I want to read his majors. There was obviously that great sale at Barnes & Noble that a lot of people know it in the U.S. with 50% off hardcovers, so I got this beautiful hardcover of War and Peace. It's a beast. It's something like 1,200 pages, but I feel like I should be able to do it. So here we go. Next up, these are kind of modern classics at this point, the Friedrich Bachmann books. I've never read Friedrich Bachmann, but Murph over at Murphy Napier loves him, and she's been recommending this to me for a long time. She specifically said that she thought I would really love Beartown, but A Man Called Ove is a great place to start. And so I think I will do that. A Man Called Ove is pretty short. It's about 300 pages or so. And I've heard from a lot of different people it's a delightful book, and it'll get you ready for sort of a more intense book, which is Beartown, which, as far as I know, is about a town that loves hockey, and there is a rape that throws the hockey team and the town as a whole into mystery and decisions and all kinds of things along those lines. So excited about Friedrich Bachmann. The Odyssey, I read the Iliad last year. I read both of these when I was in middle school, and there's no way that I actually like enjoyed them. And I loved the Iliad and the Odyssey. I remember liking much more. Obviously, a much more focused story, following a more centralized character in Odysseus. So excited to do that, especially because I've been reading Madeline Miller's Circe, which I love. Obviously, Circe has a small part to play in the Odyssey. But also I want to read her Song of Achilles because I really liked Madeline Miller. And so I think this is going to be a good place to go from there. All right. This represents many books. So this right here is the Icelandic sagas, Gilsi Sorsen's saga. I, when I'm writing especially, love to read mythology and folk tales and classic mythology. And so I have a bunch of these that I've grabbed of like the Norwegian, Scandinavian, sort of broadly Northern European myths that I want to read because I find them very, very, not always entertaining, but very fodder for imagination and for writing. Read Beowulf actually last January, so almost a year ago, and that really like kind of kickstarted my desire to write. And so I wanted to keep going sort of purposefully on that. So I bought a lot of those. That represents that. Finally, in this category, we've got Toni Morrison's Beloved. Sort of in a similar vein to my Year of Short Classics. You can tell how impactful my Year of Short Classics was last year in that I've read a couple. I've already referenced some of those smaller works that have now made me want to get into larger works or other works to read. In a similar way, I know Toni Morrison has been compared a lot with Alice Walker, who did The Color Purple, and both of them are really big fans of Zora Neale Hurston's Their Eyes Were Watching God. I read both of those latter two books this year and loved them, and so I really want to get reading some Toni Morrison, and Beloved is her most known work, so there it is. All right, I scooted the camera back a little bit. Hopefully you guys can still see my face, but my right arm was hurting from me laying down, so had to move around a little bit. Let's start way over here on the left. These are in no particular order now. These are all just fantasy or sci-fi books I own that I have not read. So first up is a classic, The Nine Princes in Amber by Roger Zelezny, I think is how you say that, or Zelezny. This is in the 70s, I think. Yeah, copyright 1970. One of the classics of the genre. It's short, but I've heard very good. Kind of a weird sci-fi fantasy mix. So I'm very interested. That's really all I know. I know very little else about Roger Zelezny, but want to read it. Here we go. A Song of Arbonne. This is a Guy Gavriel Kay. I still have not read any Guy Gavriel Kay. He does like historical fantasy fiction. A lot of his works are fantasy, but they're based on very real stories. A Song of Arbonne, I think, is based on French history. Maybe the Carolingians? I'm not exactly sure, but I've heard so many things about Guy Gavriel Kay that I want to read this. Two Tad Williams is that I have not read. The Shadow March series and the Otherland series. Otherland is his classic science fiction work that has a lot of praise. And Shadow March is another of his fantasy series. I think he's more known for Sorrow, Memory, and Thorn, the Austin Ard series. But I'm very interested in Shadow March. It's a beautiful cover. I'm curious because I really love his fantasy writing, how that translates to another great tale. Alan over at the Library of Alexandria will be delighted to know that the Long Price Quartet, indeed, I do own, and I'm looking to read. Daniel Abraham. I think this is supposed to be more sort of an economic fantasy, which I'm super interested in, and I want to read a lot more Abraham. I actually have an arc of his, not physically, but on an e-arc. Is that a word? E-arc? An electronic form of the arc of his new book, which is like Kingdom of Ash or something like that. Anyway, I really like his contributions to The Expanse as half of James S.A. Corey writing team, and so I want to read some of his specific fantasy writing. Lord Foulsbane. This is a classic of the genre, Stephen R. Donaldson, specifically the darker side of fantasy. This was written, I think, in the late 80s, early 90s, and maybe later than that. What's the copyright on this? Oh, 77, this says. Wow. Much earlier than I thought. This is often commented on as sort of the actual beginning of grimdark fantasy, so to speak. And a lot of people that excel in that, whatever you want, whether you want the label or not, guys like Steven Erikson especially recommends this book. So, and this series, the Chronicles of Thomas Covenant. So, very interested to get going on that. Ursula K. Le Guin, A Wizard of Earthsea. I think most people know about this series about a young wizard. I read some of this before, but it was in a time of life where I was kind of all over the place, and so I want to go back, restart it, and read, I think, 4, 5, 6 books that this has. Another classic in the fantasy genre. Don't have to spend too much time on this. Fire and Blood, the history of the Targaryens in Westeros. I'm very interested in what George R.R. Martin has done instead of writing books in that. But this is just a gorgeous combination of things such as illustration. It's fun history, and I'm a history fan. Most people have said if you like history, you'll like this, because it's kind of like a fake history is how it's written. So, excited to read that. Talked a lot about Tad Williams already, but The Heart of What Was Lost is a small novel set in the world of Austin Ard, which is where his Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn books take place. It's very short for Tad Williams. Oh, there's my receipt from when I bought it. Put that over there. And as you saw earlier, he writes hefty, thick books. So I'm interested to just read a short version of it. And I conceive this as when I'm ready to jump back into that world, this is a good sort of starting point because it's short. I can kind of get my feet wet without biting off an 800-page novel. Talked about these in my recent haul, so I won't say too much more, but the John Carter of Mars series, I got both of them in sort of a collected science fiction thing. You can see a lot of these I bought because they're influential and I want to read the classics. So I'm going to start sprinkling in some of these classics with more modern fantasy that I'm reading because I want to see that and understand the classics and read them. So it's another part of that. We're on to the next pile. Octavia Butler's Parable of the Sower. Heard fantastic things about this. I don't know much, and I've purposely not learned much, but I know this is highly praised from a lot of booktubers, a lot of authors. I've heard Octavia Butler is just amazing, so excited to read this. You can sense I'm going faster because I'm realizing there's like 80 books here. Don't want to be here all day. All right, so this is kind of breaking my non-nonfiction rule because Neil Gaiman's Norse Mythology is a little bit like I've heard like more textbook as far as like just some stories that Neil Gaiman likes from Norse mythology. But I mentioned earlier, I'm going to try to read some more of the mythology of Northern Europe. And I thought before reading the epics, which can sometimes be hard because they're poetry and, sometimes culturally we just don't get some of the connections or references. I thought this would be a good start to read sort of an overview before, being able to read the original stuff. Speaking of Neil Gaiman, got 2 of his well-known novels that I think most people know of. In fact, both of these now have some kind of TV show made about them. Good Omens with Terry Pratchett and American Gods. Want to get to that. I've only read one book by Neil Gaiman, and that is The Ocean at the End of the Lane. I thought it was fantastic. So, looking forward to that. Speaking of great authors, one of my favorites, Robin Hobb. I need to finish The Realm of the Elderlings. I first need to read the Rain Wilds Chronicles, starting with Dragonkeeper, and then the final one is The Fitz and the Fool that starts with Fool's Assassin. I am going to read these in 2022 because I absolutely love Robin Hobb and everything she does. Gene Wolfe, Sword and Citadel, which is the second... Oh, I accidentally grabbed the second half. I do have the first half of the Book of the New Sun. Again, a classic that a lot of people love and that has really influenced a ton of people. So, excited to read it. Very tiny print, so I think despite it being thin, this is going to be a big big chonker. So excited to read this. I don't know exactly when this was written. Wow. These are all earlier than I think. This is in the early 80s. 81 is what it says in the front of this book. So excited to get to that. Again, some of my favorite authors here. This is works in the Malazan world that I need to get to, represented by these 3 books. I need to get to the Carcanis trilogy, which is a prequel series to the Malazan Book of the Fallen, but like prequel in like hundreds of thousands of years, not like just before the story kicks off. I need to read the rest of the novels of the Malazan Empire, which is here represented by Orb, Scepter, Throne. I've only read 2 of them so far. And then the Paths to Ascendancy books I need to read, which I just have the second one right now, so that's why I have Dead House Landing. But hoping to get to those as well. So that's another big goal for 2022, is try to catch up to Malazan, especially because both of these authors are very prolific, and I think are having new books out either this year or next year. So I gotta get on that. Speaking of classics, I got this big omnibus of the original Sword of Shannara trilogy. A lot of people have said this is just like a Lord of the Rings ripoff. I don't think that's necessarily fair, but it's definitely in the tradition of Lord of the Rings. But you know what? I really love Lord of the Rings, so I'm not going to be too sad about instead of a ring, there's a big sword that everyone wants. And this is, I know, for a lot of people, like where they entered the genre. So I'm very excited to read this at some point. Oh, that's big. Okay. Yeah, you thought we were almost done. Nope. 3 more stacks. You know what? I gotta take a bathroom break in the middle of this. All right, you know your physical TBR is way too big when you have to go take a bathroom break in the middle of explaining it. All right, let's jump back in. Here we go. Dan Simmons' Hyperion. I got this as a Christmas gift from Tara. Thank you so much. And I'm not as interested in classic sci-fi as I am in classic fantasy, although I am going to have, actually here, I'll just pull it out now. Isaac Asimov's Foundation trilogy also there, just because these are so, especially Foundation is so foundational to sci-fi and more heady. I want to kind of get into that, but I don't think I'm going to say more about Foundation. But Hyperion I'm very excited about, especially because Brittany over at Books with Brittany has been singing the praises of this book all year. And I generally trust when she raves about something that I will also enjoy it. We don't always have the exact same opinions, but like anything she raves about is worth reading. And so I think I'm going to jump in and see how Hyperion is. I'm very, very interested because I don't think I have similar views on the world as this author. But that doesn't mean that he can't make a good story and have thoughtful ideas. So, boom, Hyperion. Another guy, Guy Gavriel Kay, The Lions of El Rasan. This is, I think, a more Spanish influenced tale. Again, sort of a historical fantasy fiction kind of thing. So very excited about that. Terry Pratchett. I haven't read any Discworld. I need to at least read some Discworld so I can keep my booktuber card and reader card. So I have Mort. I know a lot of people have very strong opinions about where to start. Mort seems to be it, or Guards, and I think I have Guards around here somewhere. I just grabbed Mort to illustrate that I need to read more of that. Flat World, Discworld, that's what it's called. Terry Brooks, Magic Kingdom for Sale. So this actually comes as a recommendation from one of the guys on the Legendarium podcast. So Magic Kingdom for Sale, this again is kind of a classic tale, and obviously Terry Brooks is a master of the genre, but this is like a portal fantasy where this regular guy actually sees an advertisement in a magazine for a Magic Kingdom, and he's depressed, and so he buys it, and it's an actual Magic Kingdom, and it's sort of the politics that he throws himself into. So it's a short, fun little tale. I think it's 400 pages, standalone, classic. I mean, it's hitting a lot of the things that I want to be reading, as you can see in this pile. Sean Russell. I have to thank Chris. Well, I don't know if I should thank him yet, but Chris Bookish Cauldron is the one who led me to him as a really, really good author to read that has beautiful prose, and that's really important to me. And this is a standalone he has called World Without End. He also has a book that will be coming up later. I don't know where it is in this pile. It's right here. He also did the Swans War Trilogy, which I'll probably read first, honestly, of his, because they're a little shorter, and it's the ones that were originally recommended to me by Chris. So I have these, and I'm ready to read them soon. Senlin Ascends, a lot of people know about this. A man is trapped in the Tower of Babel. It's kind of a weird pseudo-fantasy, I don't know. It's supposed to be really good. Alan loves it. A lot of people read it this year and loved it, so I'm excited to get to it. Senlin Ascends trilogy. I only have the first and the third, so if you really want me to read it, send me the second and the fourth, I guess. That's not a threat. I mean, I'm sure I'll read them at some point. Another book a lot of people want me to read is R. Scott Baker's The Darkness That Comes Before, or the Prince of Nothing series. This is often talked about in the same breath as Stephen Erickson's work. In fact, Stephen Erickson, is quoted on the front here. And so a lot of people in the Malazan world recommend this, and so I want to check it out. It's also supposed to be very, very philosophical, which obviously is very exciting to me. Baker, I think, is actually a philosopher himself, or at least taught philosophy or has a degree in philosophy. I'm not exactly sure, but a lot of people really like this. So excited to check this out. Another Daniel Abraham, The Dragon and the Coin series. It's another series by him. I've said that I really want to read his stuff, and I'm a fan of his, so obviously I have this as well. J.V. Jones, never read her, but I've heard a lot of great things. Again, Chris Bookish Cauldron is, it's funny, you can see how influential, like, us booktubers at, like, similar levels, I guess some of them I mentioned are much higher levels than me, but, like, booktube community is really cool because, like, I have all these cool recommendations that I wouldn't have anyway, but Chris said J.V. Jones is very good, and specifically this Portal Fantasy is very fascinating, so interested to read that. This is another Murphy recommendation. She thought I would really like I Am Legend, and actually the same day that she boxed me that, this was in my local, like, Goodwill for like $1. So I was like, well, that seems like a sign from the world. So I picked it up. Haven't bought it yet. I've seen the movie by that Will Smith is in, and I liked it. But I've also heard it's very different from the book. So I'm interested to read that. Check it out. Another good friend I have on BookTube is Angela over at Literature Science Alliance, and she has been raving all year about The Mask of Mirrors by M.A. Carrick, and the second one I think just came out. And so someone, I think Kai sent this to me as a Christmas gift, and he actually said, "You're my tribute to read this," to see if it's as good as Angela says. So for Kai and Angela, I will need to read this book and read it soon, and I'm excited about that. Boy, this pile is just getting crazy. So, The Bear and the Nightingale, easy for me to say. The Bear and the Nightingale by Katherine Arden. Heard a lot of great things about this from a lot of people. It takes a lot of influence from Russian folklore, and I don't know much about that at all. So I'm excited for that. It's a very short book, and so I'm excited to read that. And the current book that I am reading that is about sort of redoing, old myths, Madeline Miller's Circe, I'm really loving. So more like that, and even in a mythology that I don't know hardly anything about, in Russian, I think would be really interesting. And this is like, on the back here, there's like 1,000 great recommendations. Robin Hobb, Terry Brooks, Tamora Pierce, like, a lot of people really like this book. Book I don't have to say much about. Susanna Clarke's Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell. A lot of people know this. A lot of people love this. Susanna Clarke is a big name in fantasy. I just have never been able to sit down and read this honker. I read a lot of long books, but something about this is not intimidating, but I just find other things that I feel like I want to read. So I do need to read this soon. Definitely. Sorrowland by Rivers Solomon. I got this as a advanced reader copy because we own a bookstore, not because of YouTube, which is my first thing there. to see like if we would stock it. And I just fell behind in reading and wasn't able to get to it. But again, Angela, I think, read Saruland this year and really likes River Solomon. They're a really great author. Yeah, I mean, I don't really know anything about this book, to be honest, but I want to read it. And I love discovering new authors. Boy, this is like the Angela stack, because this is another one that she really recommended that I'm excited about, that I actually haven't heard a lot about from people, but that is the Binti trilogy. Is this all 3 books just in this? Really? These must be really short. Yeah. Wow. Okay, so these must be... So anyway, the complete trilogy is here by Nnedi Okorafor. You can see I really don't know anything about this except that Angela liked it. And it's short trilogy, so now I'm really interested. I thought this was just book 1. So we'll probably be reading this soon. But yeah, there it is. Tad Williams already mentioned a couple times. The Witchwood Crown is the first book in his new trilogy called The Last King of Ostenard, which is kind of about the conclusion of the story they started in Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn 30 years ago. So I'm very interested in this now that he's come back at the end of his career to this world that he's probably most known for. So there's that. The Malice Trilogy, or excuse me, no. Malice is the name of the first one. The Faithful and the Fallen by John Gwynne. I read Shadow of the Gods this year, which is John Gwynne's new book, and it was enjoyable. It didn't knock me out of the park. But I think if I had like a sustained story by him, I would really start to get connected. And a lot of people have told me this is a very good place to go. I have all 4 of these in paperback, and I think I'm going to get to it eventually. Just haven't yet. As you can see, there's just this huge pile of things I need to get to. Lynn Llewellyn. This year with Chris at Chris Bookish Cauldron, I read, we did a... What do we call it? Scala along? That's it. Because this takes place, the name of the kingdom is Scala, Skaala. And this is actually, interestingly, we didn't finish the read-along because both of us got bogged down in other things. So the thing we didn't read was the most known part of that series, which is the Tamir Triad. So this represents book 1. There's 3 of them, obviously. And they're supposed to be really great. I really like Lynn Llewellyn and her writing, and this is supposed to be her best stuff. So I'm really excited to get to that. I don't have to say anything about this. You guys know this. The Lightning Thief by Rick Riordan. My niece is reading these, and so I wanted to read them with her. That's as simple as that. I hear they're like fun, formulaic, and Rick Riordan as a guy seems like a really great person. So I'm excited to read that. I might listen to that, even though I own the physical copy. David B. Coe's Rules of Ascension. This is another thing that I heard was good through the BookTube. Forget who exactly was talking about it. And then like that day I went to a used bookstore and found it. And so here it is. Actually, the next couple are like that as well. The Burning Stone by Kate Elliott. And then Kushiel's Dart by Jacqueline Carey. These are both books that I heard from one or the other were good, and then when I went to a used bookstore, they were there, and I was like, sure, let's do it. So I don't know like anything about them, but I own them. Life of a Book Reader. All right, this is actually the second book in is this just called The Bone Shard? The Drowning Empire is the name of it. So The Bone Shard Emperor is the second book. The first one is The Bone Shard Person? The Bone Shard Person. Bone Shard Daughter. That makes a lot more sense. I bought this at Barnes & Noble the other day, again at their 50% off sale, hardcover. This is the newest one. I want to read this series because I've heard a lot of good things from a lot of good people, and it sounds different, which is always fun as a fantasy reader. We're getting down to it, gang. 5th season, N.K. Jemisin. I own all 3 of these books in the Broken Earth trilogy. I've heard great things about N.K. Jemisin. I've also heard this might be a tough place to start because it's in the second-person perspective, but I'm really excited to get to this. So I will be getting to this soon. And finally, the last of the books on my physical TBR is the trilogy by R.A. Salvador. Again, you guys know by now I want to read a lot of classical fiction, classical fantasy fiction specifically, and the Dark Elf trilogy by R.A. Salvador is one of the most classics. It's the story of Drizzt, which has probably been referenced or read by every major fantasy author today that you know. Brandon Sanderson likes it a lot, Patrick Rothfuss, Christopher Paolini, all of them talk about how cool this was as a kid, and there's not a lot of dark elves, honestly, in Tales. So, yeah, I'm excited to read it. There we go. I did it. That's my physical TBR. This is probably way too long. All right, that's it, everybody. I thought I would lay on this pile of books that I need to go read. Thank you guys for watching. Let me know in the comments below which books I should prioritize and which ones I should not prioritize. Also, if you made it to the end of this very long video, please leave me a book emoji to let me know that you did it. Like, subscribe, all that jazz. Happy reading, and as always, first in, last out.